Hi, everybody. This is Ian Coxhead at the University of Wisconsin-Madison.
And I'm Sandi Siegel, president of M.E and Company. And this is Talking Trade.
Great to see you again, Sandi. And boy, we've got a lot to talk about right now because we're getting a new administration in Washington. Since this is Talking Trade, we'll keep the subject matter limited, I guess. But tell me what you're hearing about potential changes in U.S. trade policy and what they might mean for U.S. and particularly Midwestern companies.
Sure, Ian. So, as you know, the Biden campaign didn't talk about trade a lot in the campaign itself.
Right.
So, and you and I have talked about that before, speculating what a change might mean. But in the little bit that was in the campaign was, somewhat parallel to the Trump campaign in supporting manufacturing in America and the Made in America, agenda. So, of course, the number one question from all my customers is, what about the China tariffs? And will we see any, change in those? Will they go away? And what can we expect? So there's been a lot of trade articles on what the thoughts are in regards to President-elect Biden. And that said, everybody is fairly in agreement that the approach will be very different. And by that, what's meant is where the Trump administration tended to have a go it alone mentality, and this is what we're going to do, and negotiate directly with China on single topics and trade enforcement and so forth. The Biden administration will definitely go slowly in making any changes. So I'm sad to say that the China tariffs won't go away quickly, we don't think, but he will look to our allies in making these decisions, and a more collaborative mentality in general, and certainly in regards to trade negotiations, which at the end of the day impact all of us, right? And what has also been said is that the focus will be less about just tariffs, and instead, the negotiations along with the other human rights issues and climate change, which he certainly did, make an objective as his in his campaign. So slow, steady, more collaborative, and I think at the end of the day, better for all of us, with that approach. So I think there'll be change. It's just not going to be as quickly as some of us might like.
So I think it's very nice to see signs of a return to multilateralism, and as Mr. Biden himself has said, we need to align with the other democracies and add our weight so that we can actually influence China. I think that's a very important strategic goal that he has. That's very good. The other interesting thing, as you point out, is a shift away from a focus exclusively on tariffs, and indeed a focus exclusively on the bilateral trade deficit, towards a much broader range of issues. So a refocusing of the trade relationship. Is that how you see it?
Well, exactly. And, there are other ways of dealing with, some of the objectives that all of us had, like IPR and human rights issues and so forth. And even in terms of trade, instead of doing trade and tariffs across the board that impacted so many companies, and ultimately many of us, the statistics prove it affected U.S. exports as well. Because when you raise import tariffs on components that ultimately go into a Caterpillar tractor or a Harley motorcycle, we're increasing the finished goods. And obviously Harley moved their manufacturing, to avoid those tariffs out of the U.S. So it's an illustration, and it's where it gets politically misunderstood. And I think the Biden campaign was very cautious in not talking about it, because when you talk about encouraging imports and removing tariffs, people think that means you're eliminating exports. And, there was just a report this week from the Heritage Foundation that talked about recommendations to the Biden administration and to Congress in eliminate the tariffs, and it will absolutely make U.S. exports increase, and make our goods more competitive. And I think on the heels of, the new trade pact in Asia, I think, again, we have to look at it with a bigger picture. So hopefully with this collaborative mentality that, President-elect Biden has, I'm encouraged that, we'll see things with a different point of view.
Yeah, that's, it feels like a breath of fresh air, doesn't it, Sandy?
Right, exactly.
I mean,
I'm just glad the election is over. That's all I could say. That couldn't go on any longer. So
let me refocus a little bit and turn the perspective around to the China side. So, during the last few years, I think a lot of people would say that the US has really had its eye off the main part of the ball in terms of trade with China, and that's dealt a pretty strong hand to the Chinese government. And under that, without that gaze, they've done a lot of things. They've tightened state control over certain major industries. They've introduced much broader range of domestic subsidies to state enterprises and to domestic firms. They've done under the radar things like agricultural subsidies. So, to what extent do you think that the Biden administration, as it comes in, is actually going to face a situation with China, which is to some extent irreversibly different from the one that was there before?
Boy, that speaks to a lot of a personal opinion on, how they might approach some of these things. But again, I think, I think the approach will be much more of a collaborative, long-term, strategy, and a more encompassing. And, even in regards to tariffs and things, imposing anti-dumping duties is a measure that many have talked about that, the Biden administration might do that is more specific and directed at actual commodities that are harming, as opposed to this all-encompassing, that's it, here's your $300 billion in duties overnight. So, a little bit more calculated and thought out for the long-term impact of some of these decisions. I would hope that, that's what we can look forward to. And again, with the input of our allies, I think, you get some added perspective.
Yeah, right. So when we talked about this a few weeks ago, the watchwords were refocus and realign, and it sounds like that's what we're all looking to see in the next few months, right?
I agree. I look forward to talking about it in the upcoming months.
Thanks a lot, Sandy, and we'll see you again next time.
Great. Thanks, Ian.
This has been Talking Trade.